Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you along to the launch of the Business Transformation Index 2021. My name is Siobhan Smith. I'm the Head of Marketing at Expleo Ireland. I'll be your host and moderator for today's event. The research presented in this report was commissioned by Expleo in partnership with Media Team. Over 200 senior business and IT professionals across the island of Ireland were surveyed, and the report captures the prevailing sentiments around innovation, digital transformation, and of course, the impact that COVID-19 has had on these efforts. Today, what we aim to do is to highlight the most relevant and interesting data points from the report and explore how COVID-19 has kind of forced the hands of many organisations to rethink their strategies, to innovate, to digitise, and change the way they engage with their customers. We'll also lean on our expertise as a digital transformation partner and be able to provide you with some practical insights into best practice in the marketplace. We want you to get involved today. There is a chat function on your webpage. Please submit your questions and comments throughout the presentations, and we'll get to as many as possible as we can in the Q&A. Today's event will run as follows. I'll shortly welcome Managing Director Phil Codd of Expleo Ireland. He will be followed by Dave McGrath, who is Director of Business Agility, Rebecca Keenan, Head of Process Automation, and Rob McConnell, Director and Global Head of Digital Labs. So we are all socially distanced and ready to go. So without further ado, I pass you over to Managing Director of Expleo Ireland, Phil Codd.
Hi everyone, and I'd like to add my thanks and welcome to you all for joining us here today in a secret location in Ireland. It seems amazing that it's only 12 months ago since we launched our very first Business Transformation Index. Back then, we had 100 respondents, and it was our first attempt at getting data on Ireland, which is very difficult to get a hold of these days, and to get some idea of the attitudes and changes that are happening within IT across the Irish industry. If I look at where we are today, this year we've managed to get over 200 respondents. And because we have a greater data set this time, we've been able to look at the sectors that people are working in. So now not only have we got the data at an Irish level and across the island of Ireland, we've also got it down into a sector level, perhaps in banking, finance, government, pharmaceutical, manufacturing or retail. What I'd like to do is just before we get on to our speakers, look at one or two of the things that kind of peaked for me, that I picked out from the data itself and from the report. And I think the first one is the comments around the speed of which digital change has happened in the last 12 months and probably really in the last 9 months. We've all seen it. We've seen the change happening in society. We've seen it in our daily lives. We've seen retailers move to click and collect. If they can catalog their products online, then they can stay in business. We've seen it with the telcos increasing the bandwidth that's available to us so that we can all work from home and work remotely. We've seen it in life sciences. Today, if you have a GP appointment, it's done over the phone, either voice or video. And your prescription, if you need one, will end up in a pharmacy of your choice. And all those things have happened in the last 9 months. So the speed at which digital has happened is phenomenal. And the survey has shown us that from the respondents, they believe that it's accelerated by about 50%. And if we look at the different sectors, obviously in banking and financial services, 56% of the respondents said that the speed at which digital change has happened in the last 12 months has accelerated. In the IT sector, it's only 45%. Well, it's close enough, but of course, in the IT sector, we are digital as we stand and live and breathe. But more interestingly, in government, 51% of government and government agencies have said that the speed of which digital change has happened for them has accelerated beyond all belief. The second area I want to pull out is the attitudes of company boards and boardrooms to IT and to digital change. And it's a particular hobby horse for me because I believe that across Ireland, we have very little representation of IT on the boards. If you look at your own boards, how many of you have actually got a CIO or a CTO on the board of directors? However, the stats have shown us that today, our respondents think that their company boards are much more likely to adopt and allow further investment in digital. And it's up as high as 73% across the range. And again, if we look at banking, it's around 63%. In IT, it's in 70%. But again, interestingly enough, in government, it's as high as 85%. So I think that the change that we'll see going into 2021 and beyond will mean that we'll have more representation, that the digital strategy will be set by the board, and that we'll see CIOs and CTOs having a presence there. Now, one of the things that has obviously happened to us in the last 9 months is many of us have moved to working from home. And the impact that that's had on our companies and obviously on our staff and our employees has been marked. So one of the questions was, how more productive or less productive have you found the organization to be during lockdown and during the remote time? And again, interestingly enough, most of you think that there's been greater productivity from your staff. But we have to really ask ourselves at what cost. And later, Rebecca's going to talk to you about process automation and how that might help you. Because one of the final stats that I pulled out was your attitudes to automation. Now, last year, we were told that about 48% of you were going to invest this year in more automation. So the question this year was, what do you think automation is actually going to do for you? And in reality, you've come back and said that automation would enable your staff to focus on those tasks that are much more meaningful to them and allow the more mundane and simple tasks be directed to process automation. So overall, I think when we look at 2021 and the data that you've given us, there's a very strong indication that digital transformation is alive and well in Ireland. Its speed of change is accelerating at a rapid rate, but also that our companies and the organizations that we work in and represent are also ready for that change. And hopefully this afternoon, we're going to take you through just some of those areas that you can be thinking about as we progress through our Business Transformation Index. So that's it from me for now. I'd like to hand back to Siobhan. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Brilliant. So our first speaker today is David McGrath. Dave is director with Expleo and is currently the head of business agility in Ireland. Since joining in 2014, he has supported various clients as the lead on agile transformation programs. Whilst fulfilling various roles up to director level, David's career has seen him lead support change programs across numerous industries, including financial services, telecommunications, biotechnology, digital publishing, aviation, and most recently utilities. Dave will delve further into the research and put a business agility lens across the data. He'll also offer up some approaches for your consideration for your organisation. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you to everybody here for coming to our BTI launch. As Siobhan mentioned, I look after our business agility practice here in Ireland. We cover a number of industries from financial services, utilities, medtech, and so forth. We cover quite a number of industries. We're also part of a global practice across the US, Nordics, DAC, and as I say, UK and Ireland. So we do have insight into what's happening locally, but also we can draw in practices from and the experience we have from a number of regions. I guess that the first statement to kick off with is that the only thing that is constant is change. Over the last 7 or 8 months, we've all had to deal with a huge amount of change on top of the change that we were dealing with beforehand. I'm sure in many of your situations, you've had to deal with change programs, organising your business, your organisation, and on top of that now, you've had to include the change that the pandemic has introduced. To actually frame this, to move on, does your organisation have the intelligence, the organisational intelligence to enable that change for a positive outcome for your organisation? The way that I would frame this for many businesses is that your organisation needs to be able to build the right products in the right way at the right time based on the demands both internally and externally from your customers. So we're going to look at this through three lenses. Product ownership, the ability to identify the right products to work on. Patterns, in terms of the ways of working, to actually make sure that you're building them in the right way. And portfolio management, in terms of, are you actually building them at the right time? So let's look at product ownership as the first lens. The BTI report, the first stat that jumped out at me was that 40% of respondents say their business is launching new products and services to meet changing needs. The question that jumped out at me was, what are the other 60% doing? Are they actually having problems trying to identify what are the right products? Are they having problems in trying to identify how to build those products? Or are they actually having problems in trying to identify, can they build them in the right way and at the right time? So let's talk about product ownership, i.e. building the right product. What we see locally and also from our global practice is we see a lot of organizations that struggle to understand the business value a product actually provides the organization. An example being in the Nordics, we're dealing with a financial services company there who have really struggled to understand. They've been faced with this brand new portfolio of change, trying to introduce that to the existing portfolio that they have and actually understanding where the real value is in terms of investment. There's a real lack of maturity when it comes to product ownership itself, the actual practice, that capability of being able to understand what kind of products we should be working on. And then the final one is that having agile teams can actually be undermined by poor product ownership. So we've invested in introducing agile teams, but have we got them right, working on the right products at that time? Some of the suggestions we have to you in terms of looking at product ownership within your own organization is that it needs to be part of your organizational strategy. It actually needs to be part of how you're approaching your day-to-day work. You need to invest in building that capability, providing training, bringing in expertise, be that bringing in outside knowledge, sharing that knowledge and building some kind of community within your product owners. And the final one is, based on those two previous points, is to trust the product owners. So if we give them the right strategy, we give them the right capability, allow them to get on and actually identify what is the right set of products that's going to give your business value. Second lens we're going to look at is patterns. I think one of those words that's quite used is the digital transformation. It's quite widely used, and I think it differs from organisation to organisation in terms of what that means. However, there's a strong case for starting to look at adopting agile ways of working in terms of trying to support that level of the digital transformation. So if you're going to invest in it, you want to ensure that you have the right ways of working to actually support that investment. So again, making sure that we're building it in the right way. And what we see in some organizations, teams being mandated to follow a very prescribed approach to developing products or services, a one-size-fits-all. Again, we've seen examples both locally and through our practices elsewhere, organizations trying to apply the same way of working regardless of what kind of products they're trying to work on. We actually see that that's actually holding them back. They actually need to have the opportunity, for example, that they have no approach to early discovery of what a product or services would be without a full business case up front. It doesn't give them the opportunity to actually learn. In addition, poor development practices hold organizations back in terms of trying to get the real value out of their digital transformation. What we suggest and what we see from our own experience is that context counts. Multiple development life cycles could actually be very worthwhile and could add value to your organizations. Again, explore how incremental funding could actually support early discovery work and getting away from that quite big business case up front. And thirdly, building development practice improvements into your backlog, so actually making it part of how you evolve as an organisation. The final one is portfolio planning. So we see 73% say that their company's board is more likely to invest and to approve IT strategies and innovations. So making sure that you have the right planning in place to actually take in these new strategies on top of what you're being asked to do already gives you the opportunity to then make sure that you're investing in the right things at the right time. So what we see is a lack of visibility across the portfolio. Is everything adding value within the organisation? Maybe there's an opportunity to start to reduce the portfolio and focus on the real business value pieces of work. A lack of visibility impacts, again, your priorities and your ability to actually prioritise. And the final one is a significant investments being made in with a very small amount of intelligence in place. So organisations are trying to put a big business case in place without actually having the right information. So what we suggest in that situation is a visible portfolio. It's actually transparent and value has been assigned. Again, an example within the financial services industry is where we've seen an organisation lay out their full portfolio and in fact identify projects and pieces of work that people thought had actually finished. So it gives them the opportunity to again reduce the portfolio that they have to manage. A mechanism to reprioritise the portfolio and a regular cadence to actually reprioritise. And finally, smaller investments or earlier investments that lowered the risk that actually give you higher insight early on. So we've looked at those three lenses: product ownership, patterns, and portfolio planning. Again, we hope that these three lenses give you the opportunity to identify within your organisation, your business unit, or even your own team, have you got the ability or the agility to manage that change for a positive outcome? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Some really interesting insights there, particularly your last point about portfolio planning and almost that idea of having that Kanban for the whole organisation. Really, really interesting stuff. So next we'll move on to our next speaker, Rebecca Keenan. So Rebecca is the Global Head of Process Automation at Expleo, where she is responsible for the development and delivery of Expleo's process automation capabilities. For Expleo, she has built a global service offering by developing a methodology and best practice approach to implementing and deploying automation solutions. She is responsible for strategy, delivery and innovation within the service, ensuring consistent delivery across teams. Rebecca is also passionate about diversity and inclusion in the workplace and as a leader in her sector, often speaks publicly about her experiences. This report suggests there has been a massive upsurge in the use of automation to expedite processes and increase efficiencies. It also suggests there will be significant increase in spend allocated to automation technologies. Rebecca will explore these findings in greater detail.
Thank you, Siobhan. And yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be here and thank you for joining us today. As has been said a couple of times now, I'm going to be talking about automation. And just to touch a little on my role, so I lead our Centre of Excellence for Process Automation. So while we're based here in Dublin, we work right across the group. And we take an ecosystem of technology and we apply them to some of our clients' biggest challenges to really create new ways of working. And that's right across the life cycle. And, we're going to look at some of the examples that we have over the next couple minutes and also deep dive into some of the really interesting findings that have come out of the BTI report. So I guess to start, I wanted to introduce this concept of a digital workforce. And how we explain a digital workforce is really introducing automation right across your organization. So whether that be in your front, middle, or back office, how can we take different technology sets to really make a difference to the tasks that our people are doing? And again, we do take that focus across technology, process, and people, because a lot of the digital workforce that we're building has a combination of human in it as well. And I guess I move quite easily between talking about robots and humans, but even that in itself can take some getting used to. but how can we really create an ecosystem of technology that empowers our people and really gives work that people shouldn't be doing over to that digital workforce. And just to quickly touch on some of the technologies that the team uses. And this is just the team that I'm on in Expleo, which is just one, and it kind of gives you a grasp for how busy, I guess, the market is when it comes to these solutions. And that's an important point as well. You want to be making those strategic decisions as to what makes sense for your organization, and not just your organization today, but in 18 months' time. Like I mentioned, a lot of what we're building is this ecosystem and collaboration between technologies. We don't want one over another slowing anything down. And, robotic process automation is really underlying a lot of these solutions. And I guess I should say here as well that we are talking about software robots when I'm discussing through here. It's really about what we can do to replicate what we do on our computers. And just maybe to give some context as to how we're combining these technologies, we can use robotic process automation, add some document understanding to digitize more information, and also have a chatbot all in the same solution, increasing our straight-through processing time. Another really, I guess, interesting facet about what we're working on at the moment, things around process mining, process discovery, are really empowering our analysis staff to get to what we should automate a lot quicker. But again, we want to make sure that we're making the correct decisions in what technology we're deploying and also when we're deploying it. So, is this the workforce of now? I very much believe it is. But, I pulled out some really interesting stats that came from the BTI report. 66% of people plan to increase investment in automation. 69% believe automation will expedite processes. And 40% of companies are automating more processes as a result of the pandemic. And again, Phil mentioned it at the beginning, these numbers have increased since last year, which is really, I think, true to what has been happening over the last several months. We can't get away today without mentioning the pandemic. But this move to automation is really with us now. And I guess just to touch on the 40% number, I guess what surprised me about this was that it wasn't higher. I guess if you look at your organizations and really think, well, what have you done with automation this year? Something that I've noticed across our teams is, if you've already started that digital journey, a lot of our clients were able to take advantage of the agility that a digital workforce gave to their organizations. While other times I saw that because the companies were a little bit slower to market on it, we're playing catch up. So I would think that next year when we look at these numbers again, they'll continue the trend of increasing. But just now to maybe put a little bit of power behind the automation, and if we're seeing this increase in investment, we want to make sure that we're actually seeing return on investment. So when we talk about the digital workforce, what you're seeing on the screen now are just some of the general benefits that you really see across the board when you're deploying these automations. Compliance, quality, speed, cost reduction, again, your people. We're giving tasks that are really made for robots over to the digital workforce and allowing our people to be more human-centric in what they're doing. And, the title of this presentation that I put together was Quick Wins, Big Wins, and Everything in Between. So I guess if I take a look at that quick win start to begin with, we were able to build a robot, a full end-to-end solution in 4 days for a HR team who were reporting on COVID-19. We were able to take the process, which took 4 hours manually, down to 12 seconds. Now again, 12 months ago, if I had have said we were building anything for COVID-19, I would have got strange looks. But what was really powerful about this robot is, it was a HR manager who was in front of a spreadsheet doing this process, when we should really have our HR teams in front of our people. So it gave a lot of time back to the team. If we increase the day count a little, so in 6 days, we were able to deploy a robot which was updating customer accounts. Now, we were able to take this manual process that was 3 to 5 minutes per account down to less than 1 second. And what was really powerful here is the process just wasn't feasible without a robot. Our client had hundreds and thousands of customer accounts to update, and it just wasn't possible to do it with a human workforce. And again, this plays into that idea of having a digital workforce really as an alternative resourcing model to your projects. So not only now can we have a human element to it, but also an automation one. If we increase the day count a little bit more again, 20 days, a payment processing robot within an SAP environment. Again, in 20 days, our return on investment year one was €215,000. Very significant when we look to how quickly we were actually able to deploy this solution. And just one more, 25 days. This was a compliance robot which had year one return on investment of over €1 million. Again, when we look at maybe some of the myths that surround deploying automation at scale, we can do this quickly and we can see benefits. And I guess just to put a little bit more context behind these solutions, these are just one automation solution across a whole subset of digital workers. So if you start to add up, multiple robots working on multiple processes, the benefits you're giving back to your people are huge. And I guess as well, we actually deployed a robot just last week that gave 57 hours back a week to a finance team. And I guess, if you think of your own teams, maybe your own finance team, that last week of any month around year end, there's stressed teams, there's overtime work being done. So for us to be able to give 57 hours back was hugely significant. Now, again, if we look to, how are people getting here? How can we get to a point where, we can build this agility into our operations? This is an approach that we've taken a lot of times across the entire group. And really, no matter where you are in your journey, this can be used. So whether you're building your first RPA robot or maybe adding in some more advanced technologies. Tool selection, really important. I mentioned it at the beginning. There's so many things out there. I know myself as well, when I open LinkedIn, it can be overwhelming sometimes. And there truly isn't a one-size-fits-all for every organization. So picking a tool and moving to a proof of value type solution can really make the difference between how quick you're able to scale something. Because the proof of value is really a time-boxed, quick piece of work which allows you to prove the technology works for what you need, but also that it works within your ecosystem. So remember, if we're building multiple tools into our solution, we need to make sure they interact with each other. A pilot is then what we determine moving into production for the first time. But again, by the time you get to this space, you're pretty confident that you're going to be seeing benefits. Ultimately, it ties into a center of excellence. And again, this can be called different things. I did mention that we run a center of excellence in Expleo. And it really centralizes our knowledge base. It centralizes the different tools that we're working on. And really, it's a place for us to focus how we keep moving into the future for ourselves and also for our clients. And I'm going to pull out some more stats here that I found really interesting. 42% of people plan to increase their use of AI and machine learning in the next 3 years. I would say, again, what I found interesting was that this number wasn't higher. Similar with the next stat, 1 in 5 respondents view AI and machine learning as fundamental to business success. Again, when I look at even my own interactions with AI and machine learning, maybe more so in my personal life at the moment, I have my phone telling me where I need to be, who I need to say happy birthday to on any given day of the week. And I think that's definitely going to move more into our business life as we start deploying solutions. But again, taking this repeatable delivery lifecycle has really worked well for growing into that automation space. So I guess some key areas to focus, and I think I'll say again, there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach here, but something I've seen be the difference between sustained, scalable success and maybe a slower uptake is really having a top-down, bottom-up approach. And what I mean by this is, from our leadership teams and from top-down, that's where we need the vision of that organizational-wide automation. When we talk about automation and digital workforces and robots, it's really a transformation program and should be treated like that in our deployments. So we want to make sure that we're well funded and have a good vision heading into that. So again, it ties into that leadership support and knowing where we're going today for our organization versus where we want to be in 18 months. And then from bottom up, we need to be able to empower our people to be innovative and to know, what tasks are possible to automate with our technology. We can't forget the power of people when we're also talking about the power of automation. We want to make sure that the people on the ground who really understand our processes know what's available to them as that we continue to move into this, I guess, more automated life. And I want to touch and stay on that topic for a moment because, when I'm looking at all of the technologies that we have available to us and, the great work and benefit that it can bring to our organizations, I truly don't believe that we can gain the full benefits that the technology allow for if we don't also appreciate the power of our people. And I guess what was great to see coming out of our report, 68% of people plan to increase investment in digital skills training. And again, this is key. I've been talking about this collaboration of a human and a digital workforce. And I've seen examples before where we've built an automation that does exactly what it's supposed to do, but when we try to interact with a human team, we don't see many benefits because the human team doesn't know how to interact with it. So we need to take that into account and really hold our leadership teams accountable to making sure that we're upskilling people. Something else quite interesting, 60% of respondents feel automation will help employees to focus on business critical tasks. This ties into points that myself, Phil, and Siobhan have made throughout the last couple of minutes. We want to give tasks to robots that robots are really good at. However, we want to keep our humans focused and make them more efficient. And that's really where that ecosystem comes into play. Not just our end users, but our developers, our testers, our BAs. How can we introduce technology to their roles to really make a difference? Again, the people element of what you're doing is so key. So I guess to close out, when we think of a digital and a human workforce, it really is a workforce of now. The power that automation is giving to your organization and to your people, it's changing how we do things. And if you want to stay competitive as we move into 2021, and also as we continue to move through this pandemic, you need to make a strategic play on not just your technology, but your process and people as well. And whether or not we continue to meet each other through a screen, head back to the office, maybe some combination of both. What do we know for sure? Change is indeed constant and automation is here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Some excellent insights there. And I really like the focus that you put on people because obviously technology and people are so interconnected nowadays, and that's only going to accelerate over time. It's definitely accelerated since COVID-19. I can see lots of questions coming through the chat function. I understand there was a bit of difficulty with it in the beginning. Thank you for bearing with us. These tech challenges are always unavoidable at times. But yeah, please do get involved. We want to see your questions coming through. We've left a meaty chunk of today's event for that discussion piece. Unfortunately, we can't be in a room together, but we really want to try and recreate that as much as we can. So any sort of comments or questions you have for any of our panel today, we will get to them after the presentations. So with that, I will introduce our third and final speaker before the Q&A segment, Mr. Rob McConnell. So Rob is a board level director at Expleo. Having incubated and developed our Northern Ireland practice, Rob has also been responsible for driving a range of thought leadership and technical innovation initiatives across the wider group, which also includes digital labs based in Northern Ireland. Rob has over 25 years of experience in the technology consulting and professional services industry. He has worked in a variety of tech-focused organisations, from his own cyber startup all the way up to the Big Four consulting groups. He has a long-standing passion for creativity and entrepreneurialism, and also, of course, for service innovation. Today, Rob will tackle the topic of innovation, one of the most difficult areas to get right within an organisation, and of course, Expleo is no exception. Rob will share some key learnings from Expleo's approach to innovation internally and also as a service to clients. So over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. That's a fine introduction. Never stop tiring of hearing that one. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about innovation, and in particular, what innovation has meant for Expleo over the years, and give you some examples of what it's meant for us. Innovation is probably up there with one of the most widely used buzzwords, alongside the likes of the word digital, probably one of the most widely used in our time when it comes to talking about technology. It spawns from the Latin meaning in a new way, and it's often a very ambiguous term. For some people and some organisations, innovation means one thing, and maybe for another, it doesn't mean the same thing. And it's also often used interchangeably with words like invention. And that's kind of incorrect because, when we look at things like invention, so Apple invented the iPhone, but they continue to innovate around smartphones, as does other big competitors like Samsung. But regardless of the terminology debate, one thing for sure is that innovation is absolutely paramount when it comes to competing in today's ever-challenging commercial climate. And of course, that focus of innovation comes out loud and clear within this year's BTI findings report. Again, that's probably not surprising given the situation we're in with the pandemic. However, this is a theme that we've seen both this year and last year. The innovation is very much top of the agenda. So whether that's in terms of providing more money or passing more decisions at the board level on innovation, it's absolutely top priority for most organisations today. There is, however, very much an undertone. When we look there, there's a stat as part of the report where organisations are struggling and finding it very frustrating at the lack of pace of change and pace of innovation in their organisation. And sometimes that's a result of the fact that they maybe aren't sure about what to innovate, back to the point that Dave made in terms of portfolio management, or it's that they know how to innovate, but they're just struggling to work out how. And of course, when we think about innovation, and in particular technology innovation, we can't help ourselves but think about some of the big guys, you know, the Teslas, the Apples, the Amazons. These guys are turning out innovation at pace, mind-boggling innovation. But of course, for the masses, that type of innovation, the budgets behind it, the dedicated R&D teams, is not just as easy as it may seem. And therefore, it's important that organisations focus on trying to establish a framework for innovation, to have the building blocks in place to give themselves a fair chance. I've been lucky enough with Expleo and other employers over the years to go on a number of business leadership and executive courses across the world, actually in India, in the UK, Germany, and in Belfast, where I'm from. And all of those courses talk to you about the theory behind innovation and how to make innovation work. The reality is innovation is difficult, and finding game-changing innovation, disruptive, breakthrough innovation is not just so straightforward. Innovation is very much a difficult process. And what you find is that more often than not, innovation is incremental, or you find innovation in adjacency. So I'll give you a good example of where we found innovation in adjacency here at Expleo. So for many years, we've been specialists in quality services and software testing services. And automation, and in particular test automation, was probably one of our most specialised areas. And what we've seen through various horizon scanning and market activity was the opportunity to pivot into robotic process automation, and Rebecca has touched on the intricacies of that. We've then since built and gone a step further and applied ML and AI technologies to take that even further. And this is a good example of adjacency or incremental innovation. But of course, innovation doesn't have to be just organic. It doesn't have to be in a silo or a bubble, is a new term that we're all using today. Innovation can come through alliance. It can come through M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and can come through very strong partnerships. So it's worth thinking yourselves, you know, where can you best find innovation? Where are you most likely to succeed with innovation? And of course, Expleo, just like any of you guys out there and your organisation, your businesses, we operate in a hugely competitive environment. Our market is a busy market. There's a lot of organisations trying to win your business. And of course, that means that we've got to stay ahead of the game. We've always got to be looking for the next big thing, constantly solutioning, constantly looking at new ways to deliver our services and our solutions. And we do that in two ways, two interrelated ways. The first is in terms of focus on a culture of innovation, focusing on our people, focusing on the creativity that we have within, giving people the space and the time and the trust. We like to call it the 3 T's, time, tools, trust, to drive innovation and to really get us moving forward all the time. The second aspect, which is of course related, is we've built an innovation toolkit, and that innovation toolkit is made up of a number of interrelated and inextricably linked components. So I'll not go through all of that toolkit, but just to give you some idea, maybe some lessons that you can learn for yourselves. And I'm sure you'll see your own organizations reflected in some of these things. So for example, we have innovation consulting. So we're lucky enough, we have a practice here in Ireland led by our colleague Brian Kennedy, and we drive innovation into our customers. We help our customers with the innovation process. We have platforms that we can deploy, and we have quick start, effectively innovation in a box. And of course, we've done that to ourselves. Why wouldn't we? And Siobhan mentioned Digital Labs. So Digital Labs is the area that I head up. It's really a technical services and technology innovation engine for the Expleo group. And we're always looking at where we can come up with the latest technologies, whether that's in terms of a service that we're delivering for a particular customer or outside of that, so that when the time comes and the customer comes with problems, we can address them. We also leverage what we call communities of practice, and these are global groups of people who share commonality, and those commonality can be in the domain they work in. It can be banking, it can be insurance, manufacturing, it can be in competence, so the competence can be domain-specific or technical disciplines. And these guys collaborate, and that's a key word here. They collaborate on a global scale. In one customer in Germany, we learn things. That means that we can pass that learning through the community of practice into customers here in Ireland or in the US. And I want to also talk about another couple of components here that are very important, and that is micro-innovation and macro-innovation. So we've established a micro-innovation function, and that's really about driving smaller, lower cost, lower risk innovations from the bottom up. So that's about trying to get staff to be more creative, to come with suggestions. These are the guys who are the closest to the customer and closest to what's going on and what can be improved. And at the other end of that spectrum, we have macro innovation, and that's really more a business case, very structured plan, business case driven innovation from the top down, from the board down. And just by way of example for micro innovation, just last weekend we held a hackathon here in Ireland. We had over 40 members of staff giving up their Saturday and Sunday, which was actually preceded by 3 to 4 weeks of those guys working together for the first time. They were given problem statements in terms of technologies and also client problems, and they came up with absolutely phenomenal solutions. What was really impressive was their ability to collaborate, the teamwork, the ability to actually present their findings in such a cohesive way. And I was lucky enough to be one of the judges on Sunday and to allocate a small incentive between the teams, and we came to a decision. And when we look at the things that were coming out there, for example, some of you may or may not have heard of smishing, which is really phishing using SMS. It's a growing problem. There've been the hackathon teams come up with a solution and a prototype for it, and hopefully we can move that on, take it to our customers. We also had another innovation where we improved an existing ticketing system for a customer, taking something like 100 days off their current process with the process re-engineering that we were doing as part of it. So those are just some examples of the types of things that we've been doing. And as I mentioned earlier, innovation is not something that you do in isolation. So we've put a lot of focus into building a really comprehensive partner ecosystem. We're always wanting to work with the greatest, the best, the technology vendors that are out there. And Rebecca talked about process automation. We work with people like Blue Prism, UiPath. But at the other end of the scale, we work with very small startups in AI, in automation, and in other performance engineering and security and in other areas. And probably one of the biggest components of our toolkit is horizon scanning. As an organization, we're always looking forward at every level. We encourage people to look outside and not be very introvert. Look outside of the organization, look at what's coming, what are the trends, what are the regulatory changes, and then for us as an organization to act on those. We also spend an awful lot of time interacting with market analysts, some of the larger, like Gartner, who you'll be familiar with, and Nelson Hall and IDC. But also, we do a lot of our own internal research and study. in a way to inform ourselves as how to best innovate and address the market. And just lastly, when it comes to the toolkit, probably one of the most important things is innovation accounting. So it's so important that when you're looking at innovation, that you focus on measurement. You focus on what are the what we call lead and lag indicators. So a lot of organizations focus predominantly on financial accounting all the time. They're looking at the numbers, and that's lag indicators. Those are things that when you know what they are, it's too late to turn the tanker. So you really got to be thinking about lead indicators and metrics that will tell you that what you're doing and what you're investing in is actually working. So I'd like to just translate that into some specifics. And we talk about at Expleo the innovation spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, we've got sort of smaller, albeit very important projects, but working with customers to innovate. So give the example of the inner city homeless charity that we've worked recently with in Dublin, faced with an almighty task of having to raise money, like many charities in this unprecedented time, unable to do their typical shoebox appeal. And what seems like quite a trivial task, we were able to digitize that. We were able to bring it online. And this week, I think we've raised something in the region of €10,000 within launch and up to 400 shoeboxes. And of course, at the other end of the spectrum, then we're working in the aerospace industry for over the last couple of years in a consortium, a BAMCO consortium, and that's focused on biocomposites in aircraft, making aircraft faster, making them lighter, making them more thermally dynamic, etc. So we do range in terms of the spectrum of the types of innovation we have invested in and got involved in. And of course, the theme that you can see there is that we didn't do it in silos. We work as part of partnerships and consortiums. And then along the same lines as the Inbetween, as Rebecca talked about, there are other innovations that we're very proud of. There's been a long-standing issue in the testing industry and the quality services market around really being able to objectively understand what the quality of your product and your processes are. And we've come up with what we call our quality intelligence platform for helping customers to actually achieve that against international standards. In addition, we've changed some of how we engage. So we've come up with our on-demand shared services model, which allows us to engage almost immediately with customers and respond to provide specialized services at a good price point, and to be able to switch on and switch off within a matter of hours to support our customers. And then also driving the AI agenda into the quality and testing arena. We've been working with some really cool startups, companies like Virtuoso and Functionize, or heavily funded, VC-funded startups. And at the other end of the spectrum, companies like Microfocus to drive the AI in testing and AI in automation agenda. So I'm hoping that that gives you some insight into how we at Expleo have addressed innovation, how we've embraced it within our organisation. And what I wanted to do was just to leave you with some food for thought, some lessons learned, things that we personally have learned along the way. And we talked about the 3 T's. For me, what you've got to do is you've got to really identify where do the creative people live in your organisation. What is it that you need to give them at minimum to get them to start coming up with the types of things that are going to move you to the next level? Also, don't ignore those that are closest to the customer. You've got to embrace micro-innovation, put a platform in place like we have and like we do for our customers, and drive ideation from the ground up. And also get it out there quick. Some of the theories will tell you, McKinsey's 3 horizons model, plan year 1, plan year 2 horizon, plan year 3. If you're thinking about year 3, your competitor's going to be in there before you even get to the end of year 1. So it's very important that you get it out there. It just needs to be good enough. Don't wait for perfection. And just to reiterate, back to the concept of innovation accounting, measure the value, measure the gain, and just to be sure, as we like to say here in Ireland, measure it just to make sure. So that concludes my presentation on innovation and what it means for us. Delighted to be here today and to be part of this findings report, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob, for that. I really found so much information useful there. And I suppose even putting my marketing lens on it, I really do think you're right about that point about, listening to people who are closest to the customer. For example, with myself, we hold companies like Facebook up on a pedestal. They have so much to kind of curate that culture of innovation. And to just watch a company like TikTok come in over the last couple of years and just absolutely wipe the floor in many ways with them, especially with targeting that new younger generation. It just shows you how difficult not only it is to create and nurture, but also to continue to make useful for your business as well. So I think innovation is just a fascinating topic, and we could probably talk about it all day. A note to the audience to please submit your questions. Like I said, we've wanted to make this as collaborative as possible. We've left a significant amount of time so that you've access to the experts today. We've resolved any issues with the chat function. So we have a few questions coming in, so I might kick off. The first one, Dave, is for yourself. And it's a question from Brian, and he says, what have you seen in terms of changes in the ways of working from organisations that you've worked with directly?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few changes that kind of echoes what Rob's been talking about in terms of identifying new ways to approach bringing new products and services to market. So chances are the organisation has a fairly entrenched approach to how to bring products and services to market. That probably doesn't fit, as Rob said, get it out there. So they've introduced a new life cycle or a new approach to introducing new services. That's certainly been one of the things that we've seen. The other one that I've seen is, and it's probably very specific to a lot of people, you're being asked to introduce new products and services quickly, but you're also trying to manage the existing portfolio. So we've seen a lot of organisations who have actually stepped back and looked at their portfolio and trying to introduce the ability or the capacity within the portfolio to introduce new products and services. So freeing up some space, giving specific teams the ability to introduce new products quickly within the portfolio. So they're some of the things we've seen so far.
Brilliant, yeah. And I suppose the COVID-19 pandemic has just shown how agile we can all be across every organisation out there. I mean, even take today's event, for example. Last year we were all kind of in a crowded room, 100 people up on stage. Yeah. This year we've had to completely rethink the structure. And I think that it's really shown the best of people actually over the last couple of months and how agile they can be. Brilliant, thank you, Dave. So we have a question in for Rob. So this is from Bill. He said, do you see much innovation in organisations that process large volumes of transactions using legacy mainframe tech, or is digital transformation mainly happening at the edges with the wrappers?
I think it's a very good question. There's no doubt about the fact that regardless of the technology, you've got to innovate, and we do still see innovation coming through different technologies for legacy and the ability to replace, whether that's sort of microservices type architectures, the ability of things like RPA, like Rebecca's talked about, to take out sort of mainframe. I guess when people think about innovation, they're predominantly thinking about digital and how they can adopt digital technologies. But yes, there certainly is still a lot that you can do with existing mainframe and legacy systems.
Brilliant, great. And Bill has another question here for Rebecca. So he said, how important is the business analyst in the transformation journey?
Very important, and it's a good question. And I guess when I look to the makeup of the team that I lead, we have developers, BAs, project managers, change managers, and testers. And it really takes that cross-skilled team to get some of this work up and going. And it's an interesting one because the BA is, I would think, so vital to what we're doing. The developers can only build whatever the BA gives them in the process documents. It's also interesting in how they can optimize some of the processes prior to automation, or indeed during or after the cycle. And I guess interesting as well is the power that technology is now giving directly to the BA. Some of the examples I gave around process mining and process discovery, it's really making their jobs more efficient and letting them focus on that process element. But to loop back around to the question, I'd see them being a key part of any process automation project. And again, it rings through with the projects that we have, working really closely with the developers. They're kind of core to the team.
Excellent. I might tag on to that because we just got another question and while you're speaking. So Derry asks, can you give us some specific examples of return on investment when it comes to things like process automation?
Yeah, so again, and it's an interesting one, it varies a lot depending on the processes that you're working on. But, you know, if I look at some of the costings behind what we're building, and if I go back to maybe the 20-day examples that I gave, you know, a lot of our projects run in sprints, and the sprints for this particular client, they're, you know, about 20,000 euro per sprint, and then we're coming out with hundreds of thousands worth of benefits back again. And I guess that's important, and I'll make the point here, you know, when you're investing initially, it can seem a lot, and I think it slows down a lot of people's need and want to jump into something like process automation because there is that upfront investment. But once you create the scalable, robust, you know, digital workforce that really becomes BAU, that's when your costing is able to be spread across departments. You know, we set up a lot of robots. I guess one of the big benefits of them is they run 24/7. They don't get COVID. They don't take bathroom breaks. So, you know, we have that available to us. But maybe we have a HR team who needs robots 9 to 5. Maybe then they don't need them for the rest of the day. So we can give them to IT teams, marketing teams. So again, when you start looking at your program level benefits, that's where you start seeing that real transformational return on investment. Again, we can go down to lower levels, but again, taking that almost helicopter view sometimes of how they can transform your business is where we start seeing those real benefits.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. I have another question in here for Rob. So it's, what are the most important things to start with when looking to create a culture of innovation? And I might add on something there just out of my own interest, I suppose. How do you maintain that motivation in terms of that culture of innovation? So, for example, you say Expleo held a hackathon last week. You know, that's not something you can run every 2 weeks because people will run out of steam. So how do you build it and then maintain it over a long period of time once you've created it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to me, paramount is to assign responsibility to at least one person in the organisation where innovation should sit, and somebody who can drive it and be responsible. So in Ireland, we have Brian Kennedy, who's our head, for example. To sit with that, I'd love to go back to micro-innovation. Your quickest wins, your cheapest wins, your least risky wins are coming from the people that work for you. So it's about putting a platform in place. Now, we use a platform called Bright Ideas. It gives a full workflow. It allows ideation. It allows you to link that to incentive schemes and all sorts of different aspects. But it makes innovation visible. So it's really that responsibility, that platform, to drive and start to drive the culture. In terms of sustainability, it's about, back to the point of visibility, making people's ideas, thoughts, their creativity count, make it visible, show that you value that. No matter what those ideas are, you've got to recognise them, you've got to digest them, and you've got to take them through a process. And we'll do just that off the back of the hackathon we ran last week. We've already got meetings set up for next week to go through all of the ideas, not just the winners, and look at, well, where could we take these things? Because the reality is the stuff that came out was really fantastic. So I think recognition, and if you can bolt on some form of incentive, because it's great. You know, everybody loves to get a little pat in the back, whether that's moral incentive or whether it's a bottle of wine or whether it's a voucher for Amazon or likewise. Linking innovation with incentive is definitely something to maintain the sustainability. Brilliant.
Thanks, Rob, for that. Like I say, the chat function is still open. We're getting to all of the questions one by one. If you have any, please do get involved. You can just use the chat function on the webpage. And like I said, we've a lot of time kind of put aside here to get through them all. I'm going to jump in with a question actually for our managing director. So I suppose one of the key themes in the report that we've just released today was around workforce evolution. You know, and I suppose outside of work, among like friends and family, we'd all kind of share stories about what our organisations were doing for staff in terms of COVID-19 and their response, etc. And a lot of them have been, you know, quite astounded by what Expleo has done in trying to bring staff along the journey following COVID-19 and keep them involved. So on that, I suppose, when you look at the workforce evolution, you know, can you talk us through kind of what you see as the big changes kind of coming down the line?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a tough year for everybody. You know, as I said in my own introduction, everybody seems to think that their staff are more productive. I'm kind of taking that to probably mean that they're working longer hours, and I think we're all guilty of doing that. I'm still sending emails at 12 o'clock at night simply because I've got the technology next to the bed. So, you know, I think engaging with employees has become a critical part of success this year. I know that we've run numerous events, painting competitions for staff children, Gig in Your House, which runs monthly, where we have a guest musician to really run a live jukebox, to virtual coffee mornings, virtual walks. Trying to maintain that sense of community has really been a challenge this year. So far, I think we've managed it, but going into 21, obviously work patterns are definitely going to change. We've moved to working from home. It doesn't necessarily suit everybody. So I think we're going to have to develop flexible ways of working for people. And so are our clients, and so are our clients with their own organizations. So I think the new ways of working are really going to be, you know, you can work from wherever you happen to be, and whether that's in the office, whether it's at home, or indeed in satellite areas. There's a great hope, which is the jab that we're going to get for COVID next year. You know, there's a time frame to that, and not everybody's going to take it, and people will still continue to be concerned about, you know, the safety of the workplace, and I think that's really important. But the real crystal clear piece that's come through this year, certainly for us, has been communication. It's continuously communicating with our staff, with each other, to make sure that they remain as that community of Expleo people. That they know what's going on, that we tell them as much as we know, because, you know, keeping secrets actually develops you know, huge jealousy within an organization. So I think communication has been the one thing, and that's got to continue on in 2021. So I think my real take, even though, you know, if we look at the index, it talks about the proactive nature of automation and what that could do to staff, and Rebecca's addressed that in a really cool way. But also that automation will impact the staff in terms of what they'll focus on. Hopefully it'll be those higher level tasks and problems for them to work with, so that the work itself becomes much more involved. And much more creative, and therefore we can continue to work in teams, because I think one big thing that we've all missed out on is being together. And even today, and I'm not sure whether you know this on down there in internet land, but we are actually all in one room. We are all socially distanced. We've all got individual cameras. We are, you know, we were masked up coming in, and we'll be masked up going out. The wonderful moment when we all got together today and saw each other for the first time in probably 9 months was phenomenal. So, you know, we are social creatures, and I think trying to maintain that in our work environment is going to be the critical success factor.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. It was fantastic actually walking in today, and I think it was yourself, Phil, who said a couple of months ago that sometimes over the past couple of months it's felt like you're living at work. And there definitely is a significant portion of people who are struggling with the current working conditions. So it's just going to be an interesting one to see how that unfolds. And also, I suppose, the blended work. So if you think about people working in the office and people working remotely, and kind of how that innovation will work with those people in a virtual room together. So thank you for that. So next up we have a question for Rebecca. This is from Pat. So Pat says, hi Rebecca, automation/RPA is the latest cool tech project to embark on with organisations, with a lot of companies feeling that they need to be on the bandwagon. But when choosing a process to automate, what are some of the main considerations to take into account?
Yeah, great question. And I build robots for a career, so it's hard to stay away from some of those buzzwords and hype that's going on in the market. But, you know, it's really true. I guess the question is interesting because sometimes when I'm speaking to our clients and our own team as well, and we look at, you know, what were the things that tripped us up in the project, it's very rare that it's the development side of the house. It's more the governance and actually choosing a process to automate. And I guess what we see really the distinction in how you should be choosing them, it depends where you are in your journey. So for example, if you're early stage in your automation, and whether that be you chose RPA or maybe another technology, you want to get as much as that low-hanging fruit as you can, as quickly as you can, because those early successes are really going to paint the path for what your program is going to look like as it moves into the future. And again, we want to be sure that we can time box it. So for ourselves, our typical time to production from idea, like your very first idea of a robot in your organization, to production is about 12 weeks. So we move quite quickly, but that also means that we need to pick a process that we can time box to 12 weeks, but we also need a really good story out of it, because that's what's going to get us our next round of funding. It's what's going to get other teams involved. So, you know, in that early stage, digital, structured inputs, repetitive, one of the biggest robots we've ever built, and it doesn't sound that cool when you put it like this, but it was essentially a copy and paste robot. But it was a manual process that was being copy and pasted throughout 6 different systems. So the power that was able to give back to the organization was huge. Now again, that robot I'm referring to was the first robot that we built for a client. We're now moving into contact center automation, more advanced automation with this client. So how we pick the process slightly differs. You know, we can actually take some information that maybe isn't as structured because we can add AI. We can use chatbots to be the input engine over maybe some other technologies. So again, it just depends where you are in your journey, but you want to be able to time box what you're doing. And I'm a big fan of a good story, so you need to have some good stories coming out of them as well, particularly in the beginning.
Brilliant, yeah. And it's great to be able to show that kind of ROI early on in the journey as well, especially if you're looking to gain buy-in from the wider business. I know that's definitely been something that we've been very keen to show people. I have another question here, and I'll kind of put it out to whoever wants to answer it. But this is from Zipporah. It says, according to the Expleo BTI Index 2021, the government and education sectors in Ireland are some of the least equipped sectors digitally. What are some of the best practices in adoption of digital transformation while addressing any barriers in those sectors? So I know, Rob, in Northern Ireland, we work a lot in public sector. I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, I guess I would say there's no silver bullet as such, but one of the things I would draw attention to is the proliferation of low-code technology, the ability to digitize quick with very little investment. Obviously, we've got a large global skills problem around software development and digital development skills, and low code as a theme is reducing the onus on the need for that. So I would say just at this point in time, one of the areas of lowest hanging fruit would have to be low code to drive change into the public sector. And in particular, low code is set up for citizen development. So public sector employees could be the ones that are developing the software with help from potentially third parties. A big focus has to be on UX and user experience, but also in general quality. And that's why, certainly from an Expleo perspective, it's an area of focus for us. We're building and continue to build a centre of excellence globally in it, and to drive it forward and work with all the sectors we work with. But I'd say that if somebody asked me where would you put your money if you're in a government department and you wanted to digitize quick, I'd say low code.
Great, brilliant. I might actually follow on from that one with just something I picked up, I suppose maybe a trend between the report this year and last year. If we look at last year's Business Transformation Index, over a third of respondents said that one of the key barriers to digital transformation was that internal buy-in. And now this year, we've seen a massive upsurge in the board approving new IT transformation strategies and innovation strategies. So is that just, do you think, because of the pandemic, or are the barriers to digital transformation constantly changing and evolving? Do you want to take that, Phil?
Yeah. There's an interesting word that was used across all of the speakers today, and it was trust. Dave talked about trust. Rebecca talked about trust in the technology. Rob talked about trust in innovation. What we've seen in the last 9 months is a massive swing towards trust in our technology and IT centers in all our organizations. We've seen over the years a swing to the sort of shadow IT, where other departments and parts of the organization have taken upon themselves to perhaps start to build technology themselves and try and lead that digital drive. But in reality, the robustness of IT departments in our organization is what's actually enabled us to do the working from home at such rapid speed. And the trust that the organization has put into their tech centers can't be ignored. And I think because of that, we are seeing that according to the survey, the boards of these companies are much more likely now to free up the purse to enable spend on the right kind of digital places. And I think that's the thing for me that ties it together. And it's that trust that's now back there. And perhaps it had lost its way a little bit in the previous years, but it's great to see that it's back.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that as well, just to go back to what Sephora asked. We've actually been dealing with a number of government departments. And what's quite interesting is, in terms of digital transformation, I guess the first thing is, we've actually had to help in terms of education. There was a lack of understanding of what possibilities were out there in terms of digital transformation. So we did a fairly significant amount of research and a significant amount of road shows to actually educate the people in that organisation in terms of what are the possibilities, what are other organisations doing. So the first bit was to educate. I think the second bit was then to actually give them the new way of working, to actually say, okay, to actually introduce this digital transformation, you do need to create a different way of working. The opportunity to identify pilots, to identify small investments up front rather than this big bang approach. So introducing them with new ways of working in terms of innovation, and how to grow that innovation within the organisation. I think they are the two things that we've definitely focused on as we've helped those organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I suppose the public sector can get a bit of a bad rep when it comes to this. But I mean, if you look at what they've achieved over the last number of the months, and we were lucky enough to be involved in the COVID-19 contact tracing apps, both in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland, but they were such a feat for ingenuity and just innovation. And again, that agility, like teams coming together and being able to produce something rapidly, that works and is effective as well. So I can definitely agree with you there that there's definitely movements in the right direction there. And perhaps they get a bit of a bad rep, as I said. So I have a question here that isn't directed to anyone in particular. So what I'll do is I'll actually go through one by one and see your answer. So I might start with our Managing Director, Phil Codd. The question is, so what answer out of the BTI 2021 surprised you the most and why?
Oh, good question. Lots of stats, and I think because this year we've managed to get down into the various sectors, has given us much more in-depth descriptive of what people are doing around business transformation and digitization of their business. And I think that's going to be beneficial to everybody that's going to receive the report. I think the one thing that did strike me, and it sort of it's maybe a corollary to the previous questions, the public sector came out very high in terms of that their boards and perhaps therefore the government are much more likely to invest. And as I said, it was quite a stark number. It was 85% versus IT was 72%, and in finance and banking it was 63%. So that for me was a big number. But equally, when we looked at the question around productivity, was the sort of the average number was around 52% of people that thought that their employees were now more productive. In public sector, it was 66%, and it came out at the highest. So I think the efforts that are in public sector quite often go unmarked. We forget, if we go back 10 years ago, how difficult it was to make a tax return. Today, it's point and click. So I think for me, that was the one area that sort of stood out.
Brilliant, thank you. I might jump over then next to Dave. Same question.
Yeah, the 40% of organisations who were actively, rolling out new products and services, and as I said in the presentation, the question for me was, well, what are the other 60% doing? There's a huge opportunity for organisations to look at how they roll out new products and services, and the opportunities that are there. So that was the one that really jumped out at me, to understand, well, what are the other 60%? What are their challenges? What's the obstacles that they see for them rolling out new products and services?
Brilliant, yeah. Rebecca?
Yeah, so for me, and it was one I've mentioned already, but it was that 1 in 5 people believe that AI and machine learning is fundamental to business success. And I still err on what I'm seeing and the conversations I'm having. I would have thought that would have been higher, actually, because when I look at how we're creating these solutions, and it's very rare that we'll deploy even some of our, and I call it easy, it's not that it's easy per se, but we're that rules-based automation, we're typically always giving a roadmap to how that will become more intelligent, right across different sectors. And we've created solutions over the last couple of years, BFSI, manufacturing, law firms, telco, and everywhere seems to be heading towards how can we increase that straight-through processing? How can we digitize more decision-making? How can we make what we're doing more effective, not just for our customers, but for our employees as well? So I thought that was definitely one that surprised me coming out of the report. Maybe it'll be higher next year. We'll see.
Hopefully. And Rob?
Yeah, I guess a lot's been covered so far, but figures like 70% in the innovation space, companies that plan to innovate, I would expect that to be much higher in the 90s. Also on automation, given the advancements in technology with automation, there's no real excuses for companies not to be investing much more heavily than the sort of percentages that we've seen. And to reiterate what Dave has said in products and services, launching new products and services, those are really low numbers. What are the other 60% doing really resonates with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose one of the things that came up when we were preparing for today's event was around, this increased investment, and I suppose we all kind of posed the question to each other, well, what about the strategy behind that investment? And the one thing that I think, Rebecca, you were saying is that now we actually are in a position to be able to calculate the return on investment from the outset, So I suppose this is a question for the audience and something maybe to sit on and think about, I suppose. But if you are one of those organisations increasing investment in either innovation or digital transformation, is it a knee-jerk investment, or is it something that you have, really put a thoughtful strategy behind and created that return on investment? Because thankfully we know when it comes to digital, that actually is something that can be done. It was just an interesting observation we had. So I have another question here, just came in from Johnny Kearns. So he said companies are reporting an increase in productivity from employees since working from home, but at what cost? would be interested in any insights which may have been noted in the report of what strategies companies are deploying to restore social fabric which has reduced. So I suppose he makes a good point there about, I suppose back to your point, Phil, about, people working all hours. We are all guilty of it, I think. I know myself and people outside of work, we've all kind of experienced it. And like I said, that feeling of living at work, especially if you're working on something exciting like today's event. But yeah, I suppose over to you, Phil. Just I suppose, around the strategies companies will need to deploy now to kind of manage burnout, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. And I think mental wellness is something that's been at the forefront of our COVID leadership all the way through the last 9 months, and that's got to continue on into next year and years on from that, because that's the critical piece. And whilst we're saying, automation is probably going to help staff focus on perhaps new areas, more interesting areas, does that necessarily reduce their work time? I think technology has got to be used to enable people to work smarter, to work in a way that suits now their work-life balance. So whereas before, and in 2019 and prior to that, probably the work-life balance was much more on the work side. So even though productivity might be up, because people are able to be at home more, and going forward into 21 and beyond, as I said earlier on, I think that is going to be the case, that people will have the choice. I always talk about people being empowered to make the right decisions. And because we've now been running very successful projects with our clients in the last 9 months, with go lives continuously happening, that's demonstrated that this can be done. But I think it's that social piece I talked about, bringing together, and we've all been on Teams calls and Blue Jeans calls and Zoom calls, and whilst it's okay in a certain way, it doesn't actually take away from that need for us to be able to see people, react to people, and to socialize with people. So I think one of the things we may start to see is pods appearing around the country, where people will be able to go and work away from home, perhaps for a day or a couple of days a week, but in a socially safe environment, but with a lot of high tech, just to get them away from working from home, working at home rather, as well as coming into the office. And it's that social interaction that I think we've been trying to create, but it's very difficult. Unless you all physically come together. I think that's the key. How do we actually engage? I talked about communication, but ultimately you need to be able to bring people together in a safe way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think every business out there is facing that challenge with Christmas parties this year, So I remember being part of the social committee and just trying to think of how on earth can we kind of generate that same sense of excitement and morale and motivation. And it's just a challenge I think that everyone is faced with at the moment. But you're right, like that connectivity can't always be replicated in the way we'd like it to be. So we're just coming up to 4:30. I did say that we would keep this within 3 and 4:30. You'll probably notice we started a little bit after 3 o'clock, but you're bearing with us as we pivot as well and eat our own dog food in a sense, by moving this event from an in-person event to an online event. I really hope that you've gotten a lot out of today. We really wanted to make it as collaborative as possible, even though we couldn't be together. So that's why we put such a meaty piece of time in for the Q&A and for that collaboration session as well. We didn't have time to get into sector specific in detail, the data from the report. We are happy to follow up with people and go into that detail with them. But frankly, given the amount of sectors that we've covered and the amount of data that we have, we would be here all day for that. So we haven't been able to do that for this. But like I said, if you want to follow up with us, there is a button on the webpage, so please feel free to do that. Thank you all for your very precious time. We hope that you all got something out of today and learned a lot along the way. We'd also like to thank All Events Media, the company who helped us run today. Big thank you to everyone at Expleo as well. We will send around a survey, be brutal. We want feedback, all kinds of feedback. So please do just take the 2 minutes to fill it out. Like I say, this is our first run of something like this. So anything you have to say that could help us improve in the future would be greatly appreciated. So on that note, I just want to thank you all once again for your time. We're delighted to launch the Business Transformation Index 2021. It's been a labour of love over the last 2 years getting these 2 reports out there, and unique to Ireland in that, you know, the data is so specific to organisations that are in Ireland. So like I said, thank you for your time. Have a lovely evening and take care.